Hello and welcome to another episode here at The Latest with Law Simplified. I am your podcast host, Farry Nally, and today we're joined by the Head of Development at AMK and Goodwin Barrett's, leading CMC, claims management company, and law firm who have helped so many of you recover millions of pounds. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Michael Jordan. Hello, Michael.
Hello, thank you very much for the impressive build-up. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Literally come busy from the office, like you say.
Yeah.
Helping people does take a lot of time, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a great opportunity, I feel, to be able to explain what we do to others who may not be aware.
Absolutely, and I think it's actually so relevant. It can apply to anybody because we all have financial products. And so today we're specifically talking about wealth management companies, we're talking about pensions, we're talking about investments, which affect so many of...
It does. I mean, people spend virtually all their life trying to secure a financial future for them and their family. There can be lots of pitfalls, there can be unsuitable advice, there can be downright unbelievable advice, and there can also be very expensive advice. And the main thing I'd want to go across today really is that it's important to be aware of the situation that you're in, and if things haven't gone as well as they should, how we can aim to put things right together. Absolutely.
And I think it's good to mention at this point that you actually have so much experience in this industry. It actually started in 1999 for you, didn't it?
Been around, yes. 1999 was where I made my first foray, if you like, into the financial advice industry. I had worked at Barclays, would you believe, for a previous 12 years, since the late 80s, when things in banking and finance were a lot different.
Yes.
But again, worked my way through, rather than up, all the normal jobs, your cashier, your foreign till your international securities, and I became a business manager in 1995, and then decided to become a financial planning manager 4 years later in 1999.
And I imagine that the culture's changed over time quite a lot. I think there's so much more regulation, so much more accountability. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think it was something in the past that was ignored, for example. It was something that was probably part of the job rather than an external force, if you like. Yeah. So you were trained to do the job, often by someone who was doing it already, was moving on to something else, as the hierarchy tended to go back in the day till he got to a certain level. And I think, again, the training on the job, it was quite demanding, quite matter of fact, this is what you do, you don't vary from it. And I do think that some of the changes in financial regulation from 1999 onwards or thereabouts allowed people to do things slightly their own way and not following the rules precisely, which is how we can help today.
Absolutely. And now looking back, you're seeing all these types of cases where rules weren't followed and customers were at a detriment.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where I was often derided by colleagues of mine for knowing all the rules in quite a nerdy fashion.
Very good. It's very good, Michael.
But retaining that actually really helped the business grow. It was referring to, excuse me, you're telling me that happened? It couldn't have done. And when I say it couldn't have done, I meant it shouldn't have done. But things did occur which maybe would have raised a few eyebrows at the very least.
Absolutely. And just looking at the team now at AMK Legal, I think it's good to point out that AMK Legal is a law firm which is related to Goodwin Barrett, if we could put it that way. It sounds weird to say companies are related, but of course they are, and they're interlinked, if you like, but separate at the same time.
I would say, and that comes down to the change in format which we decided to pursue. Again, we were formed on or around the same time as people were dealing with a lot of PPI, which was out there. It was quite a competitive market. It was not a very reputable market, to be honest with you. And we weren't like that, and we needed to display a way of showing that we were different. Even though it was tempting to go up down the easy route, so to speak, using my experience as a financial advisor since 1999. And my colleague, of course, who I work with, the owner of the business, the two of them, they also have extensive financial services backgrounds. So teaming up with them and working for them was something that we all had a passion about. And it's evolved really from, if PPI mis-selling was so straightforward and easy for people in the bank, were people who were under the regulation of financial, the FCA at the time, or the FSA at the time, if they were doing something wrong, that could also cost customers millions of pounds. So we teamed up and moved away from the PPI common marketplace cut and thrust battle of who could get the most customers without merit into something we found much more professional, much more helpful to clients, of analysing exactly what advice they'd been given and why it may not have been suitable for them. And that, as a professional who knew the rules, was really interesting for me to find out which rules have been broken here. How can we demonstrate that things weren't right? And we grew from there.
Absolutely. And what a great job you're doing. AMK Legal have recovered, I believe, £170 million in 7 years.
Goodwin Barrett reached the level of £170 million.
I should say, yes.
That's fine. And again, we decided to move to the legal firm,
yes,
mainly because of the other options it gave us, diversification. We're always looking to be one step ahead. So when, for example, we looked at missold investments and pensions when we were dealing in a PPI market, that's the next step. We wanted to be different, and we want to be ahead of the game at all times. And being a law firm, as you all know, and many others listening to this will probably know better than me, gives us that diversity, that opportunity to bring more to the table for clients who may have a diverse range of issues that they need sorting out.
Absolutely. I think it's a full package.
Yes, I'll use that. Going forward,
we're a full package. I'm going to claim royalty on that. I'm joking. So why don't you tell our audiences about the team behind AMK and Goodwin Barrett?
Yeah, well, again, just going back somewhat, my colleague Ajaz Khan, he's the business owner and founder. We worked together at Barclays, literally in the same team back in the day, and we diverged. I had some sort of midlife crisis. I don't know if I should be saying this at the moment, when I ended up getting divorced and also resigning from Barclays.
Right.
And I was headhunted, you might want to use that phrase, by NatWest. And this happened in 2008, at a time when every decision I tended to make went a bit awry. Because that was the time that I moved over to a bank which had to be bailed out by the UK government due to the financial crisis at the time.
Yes.
So I'd moved from being employed by Barclays for almost 25 years. I would have been made redundant from them due to some changes, which I'm sure we'll cover. But I ended up being made redundant from NatWest Royal Bank of Scotland after 18 months.
I see.
Ajaz had gone on to do his own thing, which was looking at being an independent financial advisor, a bit more options to help people there. And I just got a phone call one day. We were friends who would speak fairly regularly and said, how's things going? And I said, well, to be honest, not very well. And it was one of those phone calls that I think must have been there for a reason, where he said, well, come and work for me. I'm getting involved in this mis-selling scandal at the moment. And PPI was probably known as the first mis-selling scandal. And we've uncovered scandal after scandal, leading right up to where we're helping the majority of people at the moment.
And that's going to be our title for the podcast now, Scandal After Scandal. I love it.
Yes.
I love it, Michael.
Thank you.
You're the man that catches out the naughty people in the financial industry and everybody else at the organisations.
Yes, sorry, we were saying that, and excuse me, the management team behind that as well. We've grown and evolved together, but Ajaz has a skill for marketing and getting our name in front of the right people, making sure people are being contacted, being broadcast to so they can respond. We've got our operations director, Michelle, who also has financial services experience. Ajaz and Michelle are brother and sister-in-law, so there's a family connection there as well. And Michelle is fantastic about organisation, dealing with the regulator, making things are done properly. Like I said, back in banking days, things were ruled with a bit of an iron rod.
I see.
I think the industry moved away from that. And Michelle, certainly in the best way, Michelle, make sure that things are done properly. And to have that sort of cornerstone of different passions and interests really does put us in good stead to get our message out there and literally help people.
Very much a dream team, actually.
Yes.
Sound of it.
Well, I'd
big
say
shout
that.
out to everybody. Big shout out to you, Michelle and Ajaz. You are the dream team. I mean, that's exactly the types of people you need in business to thrive and to make a difference, which is what is the ambition that you have.
Absolutely.
And the difference that you make is life-changing, isn't it, actually?
It is. And again, throughout the evolution of Goodwin Barrett and then to AMK Legal as a law firm, we want to help as many people as possible. And we were surprised about how commonplace this scandal was. And again, we've used that word, but I don't apologise for using it because it truly is. And we'd had a lot of dealings. Let's get this right. We had many dealings with St James's Place, the organisation who we're dealing with now, wealth manager, very well known, very strong brand. And in our days with dealing with them in a slightly different concept, we were speaking about how clients maybe have been missold, and we can only do that, we can only demonstrate that if we truly understand their personal and financial circumstances as much as the organisation that gave them advice. We're not someone who says, well, you've lost some money, so they've done something wrong. The opposite, we showed, well, they probably told you could lose money. Let's see how the advice they gave you to be in that position may have been flawed. So there's a lot of work on it. It's not just a box-ticking exercise. It developed truly as a thorough conversation with someone who may not have understood the reasons why we're asking those questions to get the full picture that gave us the strongest possible case. And we went over the years helping people up to the £170 million when that change of direction took place and we decided to go down that legal route. And one of the things here was going to be a bit boring, but the regulations changed in 2013.
Yes.
So as I used to work for Barclays and NatWest and high street banks, that was very often the first port of call for someone seeking financial advice. I'll go to my bank branch, who I know, they smile at me every week when I pop in to get some money out, or whatever it might be, change a standing order. And there was a lot of respect and trust in that relationship. In 2013, the rules changed to protect the consumer, and this was a big thing that the FCA did at the time. And basically, they wanted better protection and better fairness for those on the receiving end of financial advice, not necessarily those lucrative arrangements for those who were providing the advice.
Absolutely.
And what used to happen in the day, and this sounds strange looking back, but if a financial advisor recommended a client invest some money, whether it's £10,000, 50, 100,000, whatever it might be, that advisor had no obligation to speak to that client ever again, to review anything, and they would still earn what was called trail commission. So by arranging that investment, as long as it was in place year after year, a payment went to that advisor. And the FCA rightly changed the rules. And they've said, one, the threshold of qualifications for financial advisors needs to rise. And it did. And that, to be honest, did put a lot of people off the path of wanting to be a financial professional.
Yes.
Lots of high street banks and similar organisations moved away from the market and said, we're not prepared to take on board these changes in the way that we're now looking to have a retail banking operation with our customers. And they basically said that if you are a financial planning manager, a financial advisor, various names for it, if you want to earn some money from your client, you need to continue giving financial advice.
Right.
So they basically said you can charge your client a percentage of the assets that they have under your management, but every year you need to provide advice to them, and that constitutes a full review of personal and financial circumstances to ensure that previous recommendations are still suitable. In 12 months, a lot can change in a family's situation. There may be additional children, there may have been illness, there may have been a house move, there may have been redundancy, change of job. All these sorts of things can affect the priorities that clients may have, normal families, for their financial future. And by sitting back and doing nothing for 5 or 6 years, that client paying that advisor a significant amount of money for a service they're not getting just simply wasn't acceptable. And we're really pleased that the rules changed at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And what we're seeing now is that, because, as you've said, you're discovering scandal after scandal. There is something at the moment, and we're going to touch on that in more detail, the management fees that are being charged to clients whom are being looked after, if I can use that term, or have accounts with wealth management companies. But before we touch on that, I think it's really interesting what you've just said there. that, I mean, even today, the FCA, I think you have lots of updated guidance that's published every so frequently, every so often rather. And financial institutions are obliged by law and by regulation to follow that. And so actually, I won't be surprised if, you go on to discover another scandal, because if they're failing to abide by it, it immediately means that the customers are at some point, some sort of detriment. So I think if we just touch on missold pensions, just as a specific topic, could you tell our audiences about that and the sort of types of cases that you've seen?
Of course, I'm more than happy to. Many clients are afraid to delve into pensions too much because they can be so complex. And as you say, the regulations have changed over time. So the sort of pension someone has can literally change with the employer they have. If they go self-employed, they've got different responsibilities and less access to funding for their retirement. What I'd say is the fundamental point is that planning for retirement when it occurs, ideally when you want it to at 55, 60, 65, 70, to plan for that time when you stop working and you need a replacement income is always something which is very, very sensible to do. So having a pension is a good thing. The sort of pension you're advised to have, and if you fund it by a method which isn't doing you any financial advantage, is completely another. So, as an example, I was fortunate enough to work for Barclays back in the day when my pension, I didn't appreciate it at the time, being a young man, that I just turned up to work and they paid lots of money into my pension to give me benefits based upon how long I worked there and my final salary. The first scandal arose when people were told to move from that because it was just the gold-rimmed pension that you couldn't beat. And people, because they were incentivised to give advice that earned them money at the end of the day, if you could move someone's £300,000 pension, promising them it would do better where it was, in order to earn something, it was something that did reach out to those who could bend the rules in a certain way. Since that time, fortunately, the rules have tightened somewhat, but I'll put this scenario to you, and it's one of those things where I do this when I'm chatting with new colleagues and say, okay, you might be 40, whatever, you've worked for a few people, tell me about the pensions you have. And invariably, these people who are quite intelligent will say, well, I've not really looked into that. I get a statement from Legal in General once a year, and I've got something with the Peru, and I don't really understand it, and it seems to be too far in the future to do something about it. And what would happen is an advisor from a wealth management company, or wherever it might be, can see that sort of like reluctance to deal with the issue and will say, actually, I've got a very good idea. You've got these pensions which are all with different providers from different times of your life that you've built up. They've probably got different retirement ages, different benefits. Would it be easier if I took over those pensions from where they are and put them all under my management at a wealth management company, perhaps St James Place, others, whatever it might be? And what we've got there is a situation where the client might think, fantastic, I've now got someone looking after these complex things I'm not really bothered about just yet in my life. But what in reality has happened is that advisor has gone in, told that client to move often tens, if not hundreds of £1,000s worth of investment that's in a particular place and moved it across to their management. And as long as it's managed and as long as the work's been done to make sure it's advantageous, there's nothing wrong with that. However, very often moving those pensions into a different area may result in higher costs, poor performance, loss of existing benefits. And we see more times than we'd like clients who've been advised to take that course of action and literally have lost tens of thousands of pounds. And one thing I'll point out, the incentive for the advisor, if you like, and going back to explaining difference between pensions and investment, if I was trying to convince you to invest some money into a bond or an ISA or something, I've got to be that good as a salesperson or an advisor to get you to put your hand in your pocket and give me the money I'm asking you to invest.
Yes.
The thing about pensions is that those investments, those pensions are already there. You don't need to contribute any new money whatsoever to transfer them across. So an advisor can potentially have those pensions under his management without having cost that customer knowingly a penny There will be charges from the pensions doing so. They will be subject to higher charges wherever they go. But that's a scenario where I wouldn't say it's easy pickings, but to convince someone who wants simplification to move their pension is one thing. And the regulator says for simplification alone, for having one envelope through your front door in the year rather than three, is something that cannot be used to justify those expensive transfers. And that's one thing that we see time and time again, I'm afraid.
And I think you're right, it's an easy sell. If somebody were to say that to me, just bring everything under our roof, I'd probably think, oh, well, it's not costing me anything. I'll just think, okay, I'll just put it into your, in your hands. And so not knowing anything about what that means for me, and when I'm potentially reaching retirement age, I realise actually that was a silly mistake because I've lost out on, as you've said, thousands and thousands of pounds.
It really is. And client awareness isn't there, and you wouldn't expect it to be. It's quite complex, quite boring a lot of times. Yeah. And a difficult part of the job is trying to convince in an honest way, we need to sit down and talk about this because we can help you get an awful lot of money back, or potentially. Clearly we can't do in every single case, but we'll exhaust our work in trying to find if something has gone wrong in that.
I must say, Michael, you're very good at it though, about talking about financial industry. All we need now is a cup of tea, and I could sit here all night just listening to you about the financial market. And actually, I don't think perhaps it's lack of accessibility of knowledge hubs or information, maybe. There's not a lot of people that are putting out the information.
And we've got some examples. Clients are happy to put their video up on their... Yeah, they're definitely not actors.
Very good. Oh, no. And I can see the emotion, actually, that it has changed their lives, recovering so much money that they now can use in their retirement. I mean, that just is amazing.
Yeah, and it's, when you say retirement, a lot of it is about future generations. We see a lot of clients who wanted to ensure their grandchildren didn't struggle the way they did, and there's certain ways of doing that. And again, it's very complicated. And you're putting your trust into someone who's earning money from doing that. And I want to point out now, while I remember, I'm 53 and I keep forgetting if I don't say it now, but there are many, many good advisors out there.
Yes.
But we're not saying for one moment that if you've had financial advice, you've been ripped off. Absolutely not. We see many, many good advisors, and it's great to see that when we chat to clients and say, actually, you should be, we don't use these, but you should be grateful for what you have.
Yes.
That's something we'll do as well. We're not on some sort of crusade to obliterate all the finance industry, but we're not afraid of where there is a scandal, and we truly believe there is one, that we'll put our efforts into putting it right again.
So, Michael, would you tell our audience about the biggest payout that you've achieved for a client?
Yes. There have been some significant amounts, and what would say sometimes the biggest payouts aren't for the strongest cases, if you know what I mean. We're all about getting the right result for the client, and not everyone would be entitled to a huge payout. But we saw a lady who was advised, as I said before, to transfer her occupational pension scheme from Nestle, the chocolate people. Other chocolate providers are available, of course. And she was advised to move from this extremely beneficial occupational scheme into a personal pension, I'm going to call it. Now, the very complex methods of calculating how much someone's lost by moving from one pension scheme to another. And unfortunately, the time taken by actuaries to come to this conclusion can sometimes be well over 12 months. But because you're losing the benefits in an occupational scheme, the pension fund itself is invested in the background, but you're paid upon how long you've worked there and what your salary is and the benefits deriving from that. And the cost to this lady from moving her pension, as advised, was over £350,000.
Oh, my goodness.
And you may think that someone earning £20,000 in a pension isn't a huge amount of money, but if you think someone retires at 60, lives 30 years, hopefully, or more, whatever it might be, sometimes, actually, if you're going to get £20,000 a year for 30 years, we're talking £600,000 needs to be available to pay you. And that's truly the fantastic thing about pensions. The amounts involved, when you're looking at what you might be getting out at the end, may not appear to be significant, but the value that's got to be there to produce that income can be huge amounts.
And I think probably a good point now to do a bit of a drop in here to say to the audience, actually, I think this warrants us all, even me. I mean, you know, my very young age. I'm not young at all, Michael. To look at your pensions, because if you've been working,
Indeed.
your pension's accumulating. You need to make sure that you're in the right scheme. You know,
And again, what I remember back in the day when advising people on this is that you could ask someone what they want to receive when they retire as an income. Getting them to contribute as much to achieve that on a monthly basis or annual basis was sometimes a bit more difficult.
Yes.
But it's about being realistic. If you say, ideally, what would you like to retire on? You might say, well, £40,000 a year should cover me having holidays and going out and upgrading my car. But to fund that and to afford it, we're not looking at anything that's realistic for an awful lot of people in normal society. So all I would say is we need to be realistic from both ways. We can't promise you that sticking a few £100s a month away is going to give you a retirement of luxury. But again, clients can't expect to have that without putting their hands in their pockets as well. So it's a expectation management thing.
it is.
It's a realistic industry, and sometimes that might mean paying more than you'd like to.
But being savvy at it and knowing what you're doing can really be beneficial.
And that's where using a good financial advisor
Yes.
comes into play.
Yeah.
Like I said before, we're not saying that all financial advisors don't add any value, quite the opposite. But the right advisor for you to secure your financial future, I'm using these cliches that,
Yes,
that are
please do.
bandied about all the
Please
time,
do, yeah.
is something that I would encourage everybody to do.
Yes, for sure. Just in relation to now, just talking about the current scandal, if we can call it that. We'll have a bit of a gloomy music in the background of this. So I think what you've realised recently is that management fees that are charged by wealth management companies have been missold. Could you tell our audiences about that and how that works?
Yes, of course. Well, I did mention earlier that changes were introduced in 2013.
Absolutely.
About how advisors, if they were continuing to charge a client for their services, had to actually give a service. It's very straightforward. And a couple of things from early days got us really interested in this. Firstly, when we'd spoken to clients of St James's Place on different matters, not necessarily about the charges, during our discussions to consider how they may have been missold, would say, well, what happened when your reviews took place every year? And some of the comments were, what reviews? Oh, sorry, just to let you know, of course, your advisor's obliged to review your personal and financial circumstances every year to give you the service that you're paying for. What? And it was almost, sorry, it was almost saying something that you truly believed that this client was aware of. And that struck me and thought maybe that's a one-off. Bad apple is not a great example of it. We thought, well, let's speak to people about if they've had their reviews. Let's get out there and ask St James's Place clients, have you had all the reviews? Because if you haven't, and it's very likely from what we understand that you haven't, we could get you a refund of those charges back. And to put a figure on that without being over the top, but if say someone transfers £100,000 pension to St James's Place, fairly modest in the amounts that we see, and if that advisor hasn't provided a review for 3 years out of the past 5, you're owed 3 times £1,000 back, give or take, fluctuation in values, of course, and things like that. So somebody who may think they've got a great relationship with their advisor, who may get a phone call every now and then, may get a Christmas card, advisors are very, very good at getting the name out there to be remembered. I like the guy. He lives around the corner. He plays at the golf club. Well, he's charged you £3,000 for something that he's not given you. And when you put it in such black and white terms, when if you went to get your car serviced and they didn't bother doing it and still charge you, as some guys at our place say, well, you're literally paying for something, a service you're not getting. And we believe it's right. And to a certain extent, and credit to St James's Place, they believe that too. And one of the powerful things about that is that we work well together, which you may think is something a bit bizarre in how we work or how we ask St James's Place to do things. But what I would say from them, they're a reputable organisation. They've made mistakes, and they're putting it right. The problem is they can't put right immediately the decade of not doing things correctly. They can put plans in place so that in the future they ensure their advisors are doing what they should be doing and doing what they're paid for, but they can't turn the clock back, and that's where we get involved.
Yes. Good to mention here, if you agree with me, Michael, of course, it's not just St James Place.
It's not.
All the wealth management companies out
Yeah.
there. So if somebody is dealing with a wealth management company, they should check their transactional statements, I assume. Is that where they should look?
It's right. And again, what I'd at first ask is, are you seeing your advisor? That's rather than are you paying an advisor, you're actually seeing the person is the first place you should look to see if that's happening. And well, no, I've not. I'll get a statement centrally or whatever. And then, well, let's give them a call or let's have a look at my annual statement that you'll see. And there'll be charges in there. And the crazy thing about financial services is that there are different charges everywhere you look. There are fund charges. There are management charges. There are transactional charges. There are all sorts of things. They can mean so many different scenarios. Yeah. And I would think it very difficult for someone, even with a very intelligent outlook on things, to be able to identify and define what these bits and pieces on a 15-page booklet style document actually refer to. And clearly that they're written in a compliant manner, not necessarily, Mr. Customer, this big red ring here is what you're paying to us each year. It's hidden away in some large documentation a lot of the time.
And what should people do if they find that they are being charged these management fees, these fund fees, and all these different types of fees, but not receiving the service? What's the next step?
Well, it's to raise it in the appropriate way. Again, you can do this yourself, direct to the advisor concerned. What we have seen, not on every occasion, I must say again, is that dealing with an advisor who's clearly done something out of their expected remit can be a tough discussion to have.
Yes.
And there can also be things, our experience and expertise means that we know the right thing to say and what not to say. So, for example, if someone said I paid in 2014 and 15 £5,000 a year in charges and I want to recover those, they could say, well, sorry, limitation. That happened over 6 years ago. You should have come to us then. And this is the sort of thing that we see. So, again, we make no bones about it. People can do this themselves. I'd just refer to other parts of the law and say, would you recommend someone representing themselves in a certain case? I don't know what the situation there is. But for those people who maybe not be confident enough, may not feel they've got the wherewithal to go through it. And those, genuinely, this is meant with all respect, those people who can't be bothered.
Yes, yeah.
the inclination
Somebody like me, Michael,
to get involved. And again, it's not being disrespectful,
Yes.
but sometimes you need to say something.
Yeah.
Look, if I don't do this for you, I know for a fact that you're not going to do it yourself.
Yes.
So let's get some agreement about how we're going to proceed.
And it's so important to have the right people in your corner fighting for you. And of course, if you are somebody that is affected by what we're discussing, if you are paying these hidden charges and, you know, the management fees, and you require somebody to help you recover those, head on to AMK Legal website and they'll be able to help you. It's www.amklegal.co.uk.
Correct.
Okay, Michael. So we're going to now do a bit of a quick fire round.
Oops, yeah.
Be a quick one. I'm going to time you on it.
Oh, dear.
I'm just joking. I won't do that. And can you tell our audiences, what should they look out for when they go on to use a wealth management company?
Yeah, they've got to know, like, and trust them. They're three things we used to say about any professional relationship. You need to know them in as much as you could do, that you don't have a 5-minute chat and decide I'm going to trust this person with looking after my finances forever. What I do think you've got to get on, and that sounds a bit ridiculous, but if you're going to be speaking to this guy about things which are very personal over a number of years, you need to be able to have that conversation. And trust is down there as well. You've got to be confident that whatever this guy's doing for you, particularly if you're giving him permission to mess around with, put the finger in all these different financial pies that you have, there's got to be trust there as well. The regulations do give a lot of that now, but all I would say is shop around. It's like anything, really, and trust your judgment in a certain way. And if people are happy to engage with you on numerous occasions without having to force you to sign up there and then, I'd say that's a good sign. A patient advisor is going to be patient when it's right for you as well.
Absolutely.
So I'd say that's probably the recommendation to make. Provides, of course, that lots of financial advisors are brilliant at what they do.
Yes, yeah. And why should people come to Goodwin Barrett and AMK Legal if they need help with recovering their money?
I'd just say that the proof's in the pudding, really. It's something that we found to be a terrible scandal. I use that phrase again. And we've worked at it. We wanted to put this right. And that's gone from making original inquiries with St James's Place, looking at their responses to us and sometimes not agreeing with them. We'll say, actually, we think what you're doing there is brilliant, trying to put things right and so on, but we don't think your solution in this instance has done that. We were encouraged to go to the Ombudsman Service, which you may be aware of is the independent organisation which gets involved in disputes when complaints are made in the industry. And we've got a long history of working with FOS at Goodwin Barrett and at AMK Legal too. And again, we use their service in the right way. We didn't say we've got to know for an answer, let's go and see if the Ombudsman can help us. We knew what we were doing. We knew the rules and regulations. And if we received a response from St James's Place or another wealth manager and they gave a fair reason for not upholding a complaint, we would accept it. It's the right thing to do. We don't want to waste their time, the client's time, and the regulator stroke ombudsman time as well. So we do know what we're doing. We'd like to think that during discussion with the Ombudsman and St James's Place, we've actually found ways in which we have got them to change their reasoning behind certain complaints. They're actually paying out more money for a very, very valid point we made to them. I can go into some detail, very brief.
Yes, please do.
Really briefly, if someone's lost money transferring their pension and they've compared the value, they said, we didn't do the right thing, we're comparing the value of the pension where it is now compared to what it would have been had you left it where it was, they pay an amount out. And that amount will include the charges because those charges are reflected in the lower value of that investment. A bit boring, difficult to take on, but that's it. The charges are refunded by the difference in value is what they're saying. However, if St James's Place said, we are not upholding a complaint because we think the advice to you was suitable, but they then did not refund the charges that they had taken for reviews that didn't take place, they said, we're not paying those back. And we argued with them that we think that's a breach of trust. That's so wrong that you've charged these people for a service you've not provided and you're not paying out anything. And that example, the Ombudsman agreed with us. And we now have the knowledge that St James's Place will deal with complaints in the right way because we use the strength of us as a relatively small business, a very good business, but a relatively small business, using the regulation that we have as a powerful point. And we're not afraid to do that when it's the right thing to do.
And that's just an indication of what can happen if you have the right people in your corner.
Absolutely. And again, we've got, I mean, this was something we started about 2 years ago and it's grown and we've dealt with St James's Place over that time. Last year, because of the growing relationship we had, we secured £9 million back from the start of January up to the end of December, the calendar year, it's better known as. Wow. In January, this month, we got £3 million back in the first month of the year for over 800 clients.
Wow.
We know what we're doing. Again, people are free to do whatever they like, but contacting AMK Legal is joining a lot of other people we've been able to help. And we can see that growing. We can see that in the nearish future, in 6 months' time, we're going to be getting £5 million a month back. We expect it by the end of the year to be £10 million a month, which we're very proud of, we're excited about. But again, we've got to continue doing things in the way that we have done to secure that. We've got to be behave, follow the rules of the regulator, but also work professionally and closely with St James's Place and other wealth providers, of course, to make sure that they can see we're doing a good job. And that's something that I'd like people to take from this, is that if St James's Place wanted to put this right in a certain way, they could or should potentially contact every one of their clients and say, have we done this? No, we're paying you out. But they like the way we work because we work properly with them. They don't have to deal with spurious complaints. They don't have to deal with people chancing their arm. We put complaints to them, and again, we help in 70% of times in a way which secures a decent payout. Actually, more importantly, the right payout. Some people may be owed a couple £100, will get what they're owed. We don't make promises we can't achieve. If someone's owed £20,000, we'll make sure that they get that larger amount.
And again, good point to do a plug-in. All the reviews are on the website. There are so many reviews. I watched quite a lot of them actually, and you can see on there how much everybody has recovered. It's right on the video, and it's great actually.
Videos, and also on there's a link to click at the top, which gives the testimonial side of things.
Which is great. So Michael, any closing comments for our audience?
So what would say is this scandal does affect more people than they realise, to be honest with you. We do tend to find that more mature, more elderly people tend to accumulate wealth better than us younger people, mainly because of the experience they've had. They're not bringing up a family, mortgages and so on. So they also want to provide funds for future generations. And it's very easy to get into a situation where you have a contract between yourself and an advisor, which is unfair. And so all I'd say is that if you are a client of someone who's managing your wealth, it's certainly, at the very least, whether you use AMK Legal or not, look into this, because you probably, someone has been affected by this form of mis-selling.
There we have it, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael Jordan. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, Michael.
Thank you very much indeed,
It's been so interesting. I've literally sat here, and actually most of it I forgot I was interviewing you. I was so engrossed, because actually it does affect everybody. It affects the youngsters. It affects people that aren't very young.
It does. What we also get, and again, this is just something to say, is that we deal with, unfortunately, generations of those that have passed on. So lots of families put plans in place to pass on wealth to their family, the sons, the daughters, granddaughters, family, whatever it might be. And we are contacted quite a lot of the time by people saying, I don't know whether you can help, but my mum and dad arranged this. Is that something you can help with as well? Yes is the answer. We can look at various things. Some people can inherit wealth and automatically start that process of being charged for reviews and so on. They think they're doing a bit of administration. They're not. They're signing up to get financial advice every year for the wealth they've inherited. So it sounds a bit morbid, I suppose, but if your family have been involved in perhaps this sort of area, it's something that would encourage you to look at too, because we've helped many, many people in that situation.
There we have it. Thank you so much, Michael. What a great note to end on, actually. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
And as I've said throughout the interview, if you require the services of AMK Legal or Goodwin Barrett, please head on to their website now. They can help you with all types of mis-selling claims, and also actually what Michael just mentioned, that it doesn't just apply if it's wealth that you've accumulated, but it could also be if you've inherited it. So this is for the young and the old. Head on to their website, www.amklegal.co.uk or www.goodwinbarrett.co.uk. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. Do make sure to follow them on social media as well, and get onto their website and check out all the testimonials and the videos.